Undertale has to be one of my favorite indie games of all times, and its successor, Deltarune, is also a pretty good game in my opinion. It's an example of how some sequels should be done. It doesn't take away from the original, nor undermines its endings, as it takes place in a separate universe. And this is a good way of doing another game when the original doesn't need a sequel, or without ruining the sequel. Undertale isn't really a game that can have an actual sequel, because one of the themes of the game is being stuck in a time loop. There's nothing is supposed to happen after the endings of the games. There's only three endings, and that's basically where it goes. Setting it in a different universe with the same characters allows for you to see these characters again, but also see them in a different light, giving someone like Asgore similar but a unique character arc. One of the most interesting things about Undertale was the genocide route, a route so bad it permanently corrupts your game, and is also built on horror and dread. One of the main gimmicks of Undertale, and later on Deltarune though in a different way, is how the game turns basic things you do in a video games and turns it into something more. For example, replaying the game is seen as cruel and heinous in Undertale because you literally either take away the happiness from the characters or force them to be in a purgatory where they literally never escape. The game actively discourages you to replay the game. Flowey himself, before the true reset, actively discourages you from replaying the game and let the characters be happy. After True Pacifist, and Kara questions why you would want to restore the world after destroying it after the genocide route. The genocide route embodies that. In an RPG, you usually have to grind and kill enemies in a room to level up. Undertale takes that concept and turns it into a horror game where you're the monster. Because Undertale isn't a traditional RPG, it's character driven. The monsters you encounter aren't inherently your enemies, they don't have to die, and as such, when you kill them, you're killing innocent monsters who really had no idea what they were doing. Deltarune does something very similar but in a different way. One of the most important themes of Deltarune is that Chris is their own person and we're puppeteering them. Chris isn't like Frisk, where Frisk is mostly a blank vessel for the player. And besides, not like in Soda and only being separated from us on the True Pacifist run, Frisk doesn't have much of a personality of their own. Chris, however, Chris has an established history, personality, and backstory, and unlike Frisk, actually defies the player and seemingly despises them. This also plays into the Weird Route. Now, when Chapter 1 ended, we all thought that Chris was gonna go on a murder spree, and we can now do the genocide route in Chapter 2, which was half correct. But Deltarune always subverts our expectations. And the way the Weird Route works in Chapter 2 is interesting. Unlike in Undertale, where beating the enemies can cause them to die, in Deltarune they usually just run away before you have the chance to. However, Chapter 2 finds a loophole by using Noel, one of Chris's friends, to freeze the enemies, which instantly kills them before they have the chance to run away. And just like in Undertale, it eventually reaches a point where the enemy starts running away from you, so you can't even say that you're doing this in self-defense. And unlike with Undertale, where it's traditional horror where you're the monster that can kill as much as they possibly can, here the Weird Route takes a more realistic and different approach through psychological horror. Besides killing the enemies, one of the ways to progress the Weird Route is manipulating Noelle. And the way you can do this has a lot of romantic and abusive undertones to it. The way you use Chris to assert yourself to Noelle by telling her you will ride with her instead of Susie and imply you are something else emphasizes it. The way you constantly pressure Noelle into doing things she clearly doesn't want to do, and the way you seemingly threaten her with physical harm if she doesn't listen, the way you gaslight her, and the way she rationalizes her abuse as a form of love, and that Chris is simply trying to make her stronger. Then there's Chris, who helplessly watches as we use them to abuse their own childhood friends, making her do things and clearly breaking her emotionally, which must be hard for them to watch, considering it's literally out of their control. This is also reflected by Chris's fight with Spamton, where Spamton says that there will be a day that one night Chris will be crying and wish that Spamton would have killed him, because in a way this is a fate worse than death. And it resonates with the players and invokes feelings in you the way that the original Genocide route did it. Because most of us haven't murdered someone or have been in a situation where there's mass murders and all you can do is futilely try to stop it or just hide as the people you care about get hurt or die. However, a lot of us, however, have been in abusive relationships or experienced abuse in some way, and a lot of us just try rationalizing our abuse by our abusers and try convincing ourselves it isn't abuse. Maybe it was just tough love, or in Noel's case, the person was just trying to make you stronger. A lot of people can relate to Chris. I can too. A lot of us, especially if you have online friends, have been put in positions where you see someone you care about get constantly abused, and there's nothing you could do about it besides watching as their abuse continues. Hell, sometimes just like Chris, you can't even comfort them or do anything because if it's an abusive parent, they can easily isolate that person by taking their phone away, for example, or with an abusive partner, they could have them cut you off. This happens with Noel with Budley. Budley genuinely sees something is wrong with Noel and actually tries helping her. However, using your manipulations, you have Noel kill or metaphorically cut off the one person who tried helping her. After that, Noel walks away and she's avoided for the rest of the chapter, besides a little bit of psychological horror. Now, the Weird Route gets weirder there in chapter 4 because chapter 3 doesn't have the continuation of the Weird Route. Instead of doing the genocide aspect and killing more monsters or trying to use Noel to kill people in the light world, instead it doubles down and does something unique with the evil route of this game, which is more allegory for abuse and the psychological and cosmic horror of this route. Chris frequently rips out the soul, and one of those instances where Chris is literally soulless, he tries protecting her, tries reassuring her everything was a dream and that Birdley will be alright. We learn about this after Chris rips their house out and is trying to have a conversation with Noel. However, unfortunately, the player takes control of Chris again, and this is one of the scariest and eeriest scenes I've seen in Deltarune. Well, before chapter 5. I've heard some people debate whether or not this scene is an allegory for SA, and honestly, while I'm not entirely open to it, I'm not entirely opposed to it either. The way we use Chris to get physical with Noelle, where she's alone and vulnerable, and then we literally force the Thorn Ring on her, even though she doesn't want it, and she doesn't want to continue this route, and just wants a normal relationship with us. Again, if this isn't an allegory for SA, it's still definitely an allegory for an abusive relationship. Now, obviously, there's more to it than this, but more often than not, abuse and especially sexual abuse, again, debatable and controversial take on the scene, but I think I want to mention this. It often involves getting someone who trusts you alone and vulnerable and taking advantage of that vulnerability. I think this is why the Weird Route is scary to a lot of people or disturbs them in some way or shape or form. The scary part is that this stuff can happen, will happen, and is happening to real people, ignoring the fantasy elements of the game. It it feels real in like something you or someone you know about could experience or have experienced. After this scene, Chris gets mad and beats the soul up, doing damage to themselves in the process, which shows how angry Chris is that we're usually using them to practically groom and manipulate Noelle into becoming something she isn't, how we're abusing her, and how we're taking advantage of her mental vulnerability. The fact her dad's in the hospital and her mother's just abusive and also is implied to be very homophobic, to the point we broke them into doing a form of self-harm under the illusion that Chris can hurt us too in the process. Then we get to chapter 5 where the Weird Route, as of me recording this, ends. We might not see the conclusion of it for at least another 2 years. So the Weird Route scene begins at the lake where Noelle and Chris talk alone. Here we get to learn a lot about Noelle as a character and her mental state, how she feels like she's supposed to be a Noelle, doing Noelle things, and her desire to leave hometown, which she also expresses in the normal route. We already know that leaving hometown might just be code word for suicide, as she mentions growing wings, something as angels do, and could be symbolism of going to heaven when she says going out of hometown, because you're flying up just like you would fly up to heaven. She also mentions she's inspired by Chris because they aren't a Chris doing Chris things, which is ironic because Chris isn't doing Chris things not because they're free, the exact opposite actually, which makes this scene tragic because Noelle is living in the delusion, trying to cope, and she doesn't realize Chris isn't doing any of this because they're free. And then she asks to see the other side of the lake and asks us to proceed. We get the most disturbing scene in the franchise by far, when you literally start drowning yourself, and the best way I can describe it is a comment I saw a while back about this being a scene out of a creepypasta, where the main character is forced to watch something disturbing happen in a video game. And while we probably used to mock those protagonists back then, I think their reaction makes sense now that we get to experience it ourselves. For me personally, I can relate to this scene on a fundamental level, as I've been in a near fatal car crash and had PTSD from it. I've also nearly drowned, but that was when I was younger. And the two things I found realistic is the fact the scene emphasizes the need to breathe while drowning, because you can hear breathing in the music uh, while it's going on. And also the fact you lose your senses and you can't really process what is happening at the time till much later. Like when I got into my car crash, I couldn't process what happened until after the impact. Like I didn't feel anything. The world just went blank, or in this case, white, as the scene portrays. Anyways, that's where the Weird Route ends. It'll continue in Chapter 7 Side B, so we'll have to wait an extra year to see where the Weird Route will take us. So in conclusion, I think the Weird Route is probably one of those most compelling and terrifying routes that Toby Fox has come up with, and it evokes more fear and anguish in the player than the original Genocide Route did. And I think it's purely because of how real it feels, how relatable it is to some people, and how unfortunately a lot of people have been in the same situation as Noel and Chris. Anyways, on a lighter note, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I tried my best to make the editing better and also to talk better in my videos and also to talk about a game I really like. Honestly, I can't wait till I can start talking about Undertale, but since that is still one of my favorite video games of all time. Also, thank you for the love and support for the videos these past few days. Hopefully I can pop out more videos. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and see you guys in the next one.